Hey guys, welcome back to more Malicious Compliance HOA Reddit stories. In this Ripestories video, imagine the HOA invents a fake officer program and starts patrolling like it is a police state. They then try it at the wrong house at the wrong time, and they dared me to challenge HOA authority. So I did, right in front of them. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled, HOA officers invaded my home over pressure washing. Instant arrest ensues. So when my wife and I bought our house a few years ago, the neighborhood seemed perfect. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, and friendly neighbors waving from their porches. The HOA seemed like a minor inconvenience at worst, just another box to check during the buying process. Huge mistake, by the way. For the first 2 years, everything was fine. We paid our dues, kept our lawn trimmed, and didn't paint our house purple or park a boat in the driveway. Just the standard stuff, you know. The HOA sent out their monthly newsletter reminding everyone about community events and basic rules, but they mostly stayed out of our lives. And then she showed up. I'm just gonna call her Karen because honestly, that's exactly what she was. She moved into a house 3 doors down from us and immediately got herself elected to the HOA board. Within a month, she had maneuvered herself into the position of HOA president after the previous president, a reasonable guy who had held the position for years, suddenly resigned. The problem started small. I got my first violation notice about 6 weeks after she took over. Apparently my trash cans were visible from the street on a non-collection day. Never mind that I had brought them in from the curb that morning after the truck came and just had not walked them all the way back to the garage yet. Never mind that it was 10 AM on a Tuesday and I was literally in the process of putting them away. Someone, and I had a pretty good idea who, had driven by, snapped a photo and generated a violation notice complete with a $50 fine. I paid it, didn't seem worth fighting over $50. The next month I got another notice. This time my grass was allegedly 0.5 inches too tall and the HOA rules stated that grass could not exceed 3 inches in height. I had mowed 3 days earlier and I went out with a tape measure and checked multiple spots and the tallest blade I found was 2.75 inches. I took photos, documented everything and submitted an appeal. But Karen denied it. Another $50 fine. Then came a violation for my mailbox being weathered. It was a standard black mailbox that I'd installed when we moved in. It had some minor fading from the sun, sure, but it was perfectly functional and looked fine. The third was a $50 fine. I started to realize this was not about rule enforcement anymore. This was personal, though I had no idea why. I'd never even spoken to the woman beyond a polite hello when she first moved in, but the violations kept coming. My garden hose was visible coiled next to the house. A fine. I had a small decorative flag hanging by my front door for my wife's favorite sports team. You guessed it, fine. One of my house numbers was slightly crooked. Fine. A package sat on my porch for 4 hours before I got home from work. Fine. And each one was $50 and each one I tried to appeal and each one was denied. So yeah, my wife was getting stressed about it. We had already paid over $400 in fines in just a few months and it felt like Karen was specifically targeting us. I started documenting everything, taking photos of my property from every angle at different times of day just to have evidence when the next bogus violation showed up. Other neighbors started telling me that they were having similar problems, but most of them were just paying the fines to make it go away. A few had gotten so frustrated they were considering selling and moving, which seemed insane, but I was starting to understand the impulse, and then Karen escalated things further. About 8 months ago, I came home to find a notice on my door announcing the formation of the so-called HOA officers. According to this new policy, Karen had appointed 3 volunteers to act as official enforcers of HOA rules. They would have the authority to conduct property inspections, issue immediate violation notices, and even access common areas and transitional spaces to ensure compliance. That last phrase bothered me, but the document was deliberately vague about what qualified as a transitional space. The 3 people she had appointed were equally problematic. One was her next-door neighbor, a retired guy who had spent most of his time glaring at people from his porch, and the second was someone I'd never seen before, possibly didn't even live in the neighborhood, and the third was Karen's adult son, who had recently moved in with her. These people started patrolling the neighborhood like they were actual law enforcement. They wore matching polo shirts with HOA officer embroidered on them, they carried clipboards and cameras, and they drove up slowly and down the streets, stopping to take photos of properties and peer into yards. It was creepy and intimidating, which I'm sure was exactly the point of all of this, and I got my first visit from an HOA officer about a week after they started. I was outside planting some flowers in my front garden when a car pulled up and the retired guy got out with his clipboard. "You need to move those flowers, that's a violation of the approved plant list." I looked down at the completely normal petunias I had just bought from the garden center. Petunias are not on the approved list? Not those colors, only pink and white petunias are approved, those are purple. They are literally the same plant. Rules are rules. You have 24 hours to remove them or else it's a fine. He took several photos and walked away without another word. I checked the HOA rules that night and there was indeed an approved plant list, but it was from 2008 and had not been updated since. But petunias were listed with no color restrictions, so I sent a lengthy email to the HOA board with screenshots and citations, and Karen responded that the rules had been updated and I should have received the new guidelines, but I never had. When I asked for a copy of these updated rules, she said they were still being finalized, but were in effect immediately anyway. You cannot make this stuff up. The harassments increased over the following months. The HOA officers started showing up multiple times a week, and they would find problems that didn't even exist. They would take photos from weird angles to make things look worse than they were. Then they would show up at inconvenient times and knock on doors demanding to discuss violations. My wife started having anxiety attacks. She didn't want to work in our garden anymore because she was afraid of being watched and criticized. We couldn't relax on our own property. We both started dreading coming home. I consulted with a lawyer about the situation, and he said that HOAs have broad authority and fighting them can be expensive and time-consuming. He could help if I wanted to pursue it, but it might cost thousands in legal fees with no guarantee of success. The easier solution, he said, was to just follow the rules exactly and document everything, so that's what I tried to do. I created a massive binder with printed copies of every HOA rule I could find. I documented the date and time of every violation notice, and I took daily photos of my entire property. I kept records of every interaction with Karen or her HOA officers, and I was building a paper trail in case this ever went to court. Things reached a breaking point 2 weeks ago. It was a Saturday morning and I decided to pressure wash my back patio. The concrete had accumulated some dirt and grime over the winter, and with summer coming up I wanted to clean it off so we could enjoy our outdoor space. The pressure washer was a birthday gift from my dad a few years back, and I'd used it plenty of times before without issue. I should mention though that my back garden is completely fenced. It's a 6-foot privacy fence that we'd installed shortly after moving in. You cannot see into our backyard from the street or from most of the neighboring properties. It is our private space. I was about an hour into the job making good progress when I heard a loud banging sound from the direction of my side gate. I turned off the pressure washer and walked over to investigate. Through the fence slats I could see someone messing with the gate lock. Before I could even react, there was a snapping sound and my gate swung open. 3 people barged into my backyard, the retired HOA officer, Karen's son, and the third person that I didn't recognize. All 3 were wearing their HOA officer polo shirts and carrying their clipboards and phones. "What the hell are you doing? This is my private property." The retired guy spoke first and said, "We received a complaint about excessive water usage and power equipment violation. We're here to investigate." "You cannot just break into my yard. Get out of here." Karen's son stepped forward with his phone held up recording. "According to HOA Regulations Section 5.2, power equipment including pressure washers can only be used between 9 AM and 11 AM on weekdays or 10 AM to noon on weekends. It's currently 11:47 AM on a Saturday. You're in violation." I was so angry at this point I could barely form words. Even if that were true and I don't remember any such rule, you cannot just break into my property. Also, you just destroyed my lock. We have authority to access property for rule enforcement. This is necessary to document the violation. The third HOA officer, the one I'd never seen before, started walking around my patio taking photos and videos of everything. My pressure washer, my garden furniture, the half-clean concrete, just everything. "I want you out of my yard now, or I'm calling the police." "Go ahead and call them. We are within our rights as HOA officers. We dare you to challenge the authority of the HOA." So I did. I complied with their order to challenge the authority of this idiotic HOA, and I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 right there while these 3 people stood in my backyard like they owned the place. The dispatcher answered back and I explained the situation as calmly as I could. 3 people had broken into my property, destroyed my lock and were refusing to leave despite multiple requests. She said she was sending officers and to stay on the line. The HOA officers heard this and seemed to finally realize that they might have made a mistake. The retired guy said something about how they had completed their inspection and were leaving, but they'd make sure I received a violation notice for my pressure washing activities. They started walking towards the gate, but I blocked their path. "No, you broke into my property. You're staying right here until the police arrive. You cannot hold us here, that's false imprisonment. You're free to leave through the front, go around, but you're not leaving through the gate that you broke into." This was petty on my part, I'll admit, but I wanted them to still be in my backyard when the police showed up and I wanted there to be no question about what had happened. They grumbled but didn't try to push past me. We stood there in awkward silence for a while until I heard the doorbell ring at the front of the house. I led the cops, 2 of them, through my house and out to the backyard. I explained what had happened, showed them the broken lock on the ground, and pointed out the 3 people who had broken in. The lead officer, an older guy with grey hair, listened to my explanation and then turned to the HOA officers. "Did you enter this property without permission?" The retired guy started to explain about their authority as HOA officers and how they were enforcing community rules. The police officer held up his hand to stop him. "That's not what I asked. Did you enter this property without permission? We have authority through the HOA to access properties for inspections and violations." "Well, show me the document that gives you that authority." The retired guy pulled out a printed sheet from his clipboard. It was the same notice about HOA officers that has been distributed months ago. The police read it over and handed it back. "This does not even give you authority to enter private property without consent, and this is not a common area. This is his backyard. Did the homeowner give you permission to enter?" "We don't need permission. We are HOA officers." The second police officer, a younger woman, spoke up. "HOA board members and volunteers don't have special legal authority to trespass on private property. You are residents enforcing private community rules, not law enforcement. You cannot break someone's lock and enter their property." That is when Karen's son made a huge mistake. He apparently decided this was a good time to assert his authority. "We have every right to enforce HOA rules. This homeowner has been in repeated violation of community standards. He's been hostile and uncooperative. We are documenting everything for the board." He raised his phone to record the police officers. "Sir, I'm going to need you to put the phone down." "I'm recording this interaction. I have a right to film police officers." "You're on private property. The homeowner has not consented to you recording on his property. Put the phone down." "I'm an HOA officer conducting an official inspection." The lead officer's expression shifted. He had been relatively patient up until this point, but his tone got noticeably firmer. "Sir, put the phone down." Karen's son made another bad decision. Instead of complying, he took a step back and kept recording. "This is harassment. We are legitimate HOA officers and we are being prevented from doing our jobs." That did it. The lead officer moved forward and in about 3 seconds had the phone out of the guy's hand and him in handcuffs. The second officer moved to the other 2 HOA officers and asked them to place their hands behind their backs. The retired guy started sputtering about his rights and how this was an outrage. The third HOA officer, who had been mostly quiet this whole time, at least had the sense to comply without argument. All 3 were handcuffed within minutes. The lead officer looked at me and said, "Do you want to press charges for criminal trespass and destruction of property?" "Absolutely. We will need you to come down to the station though to file a formal complaint and statement. These 3 are going to be arrested and transported away. Do you have a way to secure your gate until you can replace the lock?" I said I had some tools in my garage and could rig something temporarily. My wife had come outside during all of this and having heard the commotion, and she stood next to me looking absolutely stunned as 3 people in HOA officer polo shirts were walked through our house and out to the police cars in front. Now several neighbors had come out to watch and I saw someone a few houses down recording on their phone. This was gonna be the talk of the neighborhood for months. After the police left, I took detailed photos of the broken lock, the gate damage and everything else. I documented the exact time everything happened. My wife and I sat at the kitchen table trying to process what had just occurred. An hour later my phone rang. It was Karen. Her voice was shaking with rage. "What have you done? My son has been arrested." "Those officers were doing their jobs. Your son and his friends broke into my property, Karen. They destroyed my lock. They refused to leave when I asked them to. What did you think would happen?" "That is all your fault. You've been violating HOA rules for months. We have every right to enforce compliance." "You have the right to send violation notices. You have the right to fine people according to your rules. You don't have the right to break into people's yards." "I'm the HOA president. I'll make sure you're fined for every single violation. I'll make your life miserable." "Looking forward to it." I hung up. My wife was worried about retaliation, and honestly, so was I, but I was also done being pushed around. I'd followed the rules, paid absurd fines for nonsense violations, and tried to be reasonable. They had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I went down to the police station that afternoon and filed formal charges against all three. Criminal trespass, destruction of property, and I also mentioned the harassment and intimidation that had been ongoing for months. The officer, taking my statement, was thorough and professional. He said cases like this were not uncommon with overzealous HOA boards, and they took property rights seriously. The next day, I got a call from a different neighbor. Apparently, word had spread around about what happened, and several other people who had been harassed by the HOA officers wanted to know if they could file complaints too. I gave them the information for the officer I'd spoken with and encouraged them to document everything. 4 other families ended up filing complaints about the HOA officers. Stories ranged from them demanding to inspect garages and sheds to threatening people with immediate fines if they didn't allow access to their property, to taking photos through windows into people's homes. It turned out Karen had created her little task force without proper authorization from the HOA board. The 2 other board members, who I'd barely heard from in months, apparently had not approved this program, and they had been blindsided as everyone else. Sometime later, an HOA board meeting was called. I attended along with about 40 other residents, which was apparently unprecedented. The meeting was supposed to be about addressing recent events, but it actually turned into a referendum on Karen's leadership. People were angry. Multiple residents stood up and shared their experiences with excessive fines, harassment, and intimidation. Others pointed out that the HOA budget was actually being mismanaged and funds were being spent on things that had not been approved. Someone had done research and found that several of the updated rules that Karen had been enforcing did not actually exist in any official capacity. The other 2 board members looked increasingly uncomfortable as the meeting went on. It became clear they had been either complicit or negligent in letting Karen run wild with her power trip. A motion was made to remove Karen as HOA president, and it passed with near unanimous support from the residents present. A second motion was made to dissolve the HOA officer program entirely, which also passed unanimously. Karen tried to maintain control, but she had lost whatever support she might have had left. She ended up storming out of the meeting, shouting about how we'd all regret this and the neighborhood would fall into chaos without proper rule enforcement. The criminal charges against the 3 HOA officers moved forward, and Karen's son ended up with a misdemeanor conviction and community service, and the retired guy got probation. The third person, who apparently didn't even live in the neighborhood and was just someone Karen knew, got off with just a fine, since he had not been as actively involved in the breaking and entering. Karen's son also had to pay for my new gate lock and the damage to my fence, which came to about $300. Not a huge amount, but it was the principle of the thing. The HOA itself underwent major restructuring. New board members were elected, all of whom ran on platforms of reasonable rule enforcement and respecting residents' privacy. One of the first things they did was review all the fines that had been issued over the past 2 years, and they determined that over 60% of them had been improper or based on rules that didn't actually exist. Mine were among them. I got a refund check for $450, which was every fine I had paid. Several other residents got much larger refunds, some in the thousands. The new board also clarified the rules about property inspections. Unless there's an obvious visible violation from public areas, they cannot enter private property without permission. No more peeking over fences or demanding access to backyards. My wife and I can finally relax in our home again. I finished pressure washing the patio, and it looks great. We have been using it almost every evening now that the weather is nice, having dinner outside and just enjoying our space without looking over our shoulders. The neighborhood has improved dramatically. People are friendlier, more willing to chat and help each other out. There's a sense that we all went through something together and came out better for it. A few of the neighbors who had been considering moving decided to actually stay. You cannot let people abuse whatever small amount of power they have. You just cannot let bullies win just because fighting back is difficult or uncomfortable. Sometimes you gotta draw a line and defend it, even if it means dealing with conflict and stress in the short term. And sometimes, just sometimes, the bullies actually face consequences for their actions. Living in an HOA does not have to be a nightmare. It can actually be fine when the people in charge are reasonable and focused on maintaining property values and community standards rather than power tripping and harassing residents over trivial nonsense. We are fortunate that our community was also able to course correct before things got even worse. Some people are not so lucky and end up stuck in situations where they have to either comply with unreasonable demands or move away. And the next one is a petty revenge story that is titled Ask Me About My Weight, Let's Make It Awkward. So I, 36 male, work in an office that is exclusively made up of male coworkers. I am 185 centimeters tall, 6'07", to my 70 kilograms, 154 pounds, which means I present as quite skinny. To be clear though, I do not have any EDs or illnesses. I have deduced it to be related to high metabolism. Either way, I feel and am perfectly healthy as confirmed by my GP. The big boss, let's call him High Septon, has made some jabs and playful jokes as he probably would phrase it, especially in regards to my weight, like calling me Sparrow in my native language, which is normally interpreted as a small, skinny, frail person. I don't really care what he thinks about me personally. He does not know me on a personal level, but it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I may be able to take it, but what of my colleagues? Not everyone has thick skin, and not everyone can just shake it off, so I decided to throw a wrench in there the next time he brought it up. So yesterday, the High Septon, HS, came over to my desk and asked me something, which for some reason led into a discussion about food. HS: "So what are you gonna eat today, Sparrow?" Falsely insinuating that I don't even eat every day. Me: "Nah, I'm on a diet trying to lose weight." HS: "What? Yeah, I've been feeling kind of bloated lately. I don't want to lose like 10 kilograms, I said. High Septon HS said, "But you cannot do that. You're not really on a diet, are you?" I just shrugged and went back to working. He just stared at me and then meeked back to his own desk. For clarity, I currently have a BMI of 20.5. The imaginary target weight I threw at him would put me at 17.5, which is way too low. I have absolutely no plans on losing any weight. If anything, I struggle to put on weight, and he avoided me for the rest of the day and hasn't looked at me all day today, and best of all, no comments about food or weight. If he says something more, I'm gonna call him out, but for now, I'll just continue to wallow in the awkward, tense environment I've managed to create. And yeah guys, thanks for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.